Welcome back, everyone. I wanted to do some coverage of a news story that came out, I believe, yesterday. I guess it was a slow news day, and they were talking about insects intercepted at Dulles International Airport outside DC in Virginia. And I live in Maryland, so I'm pretty close to this. And not only that, but I know a lot about this subject because I did this job for 8.5 years. Um, so I wanted to show you this video and do some reaction and tell you guys some stuff that they don't cover in this news article, some behind the scenes stuff that you wouldn't really know about, because the truth about the international airport system in this country and partially the port system is pretty grim. So I wanted to talk about this while it's relevant in the news, and I'll just play this. This is a local news story out of Virginia. I believe it's Virginia. But they get a pretty good gist of everything.
To environmental reporting tonight is going to take us on a trip behind one of the headlines that we had this week. Custom and Border Protection agents at Dulles Airport intercepted two invasive insect species hidden in a shipment of flowers. One not seen here in the U.S. in 40 years, the other completely new to the region.
And it may seem like, oh, that's just a little thing, but really it's not, because these little pests can cause billions of dollars in agriculture and environmental damage. So how do agents spot threats like?
So just to give some context for this, because this was a shipment of flowers, Dulles is not a normal import area for large shipments of flowers. Large shipments of flowers in the United States coming internationally are shipped through just a handful of ports. I believe it's like LA, San Juan, Puerto Rico, Houston, Texas, Miami, Florida, and maybe JFK in New York. And those are like the really, really big shipments, like tens of thousands of stems of flowers. Most of them are coming from South America, so like Colombia and Ecuador. And there's generally not a lot of control on that. They are inspected for pests. But generally speaking, tropical insects from the New World are not considered a huge problem because a lot of them are either incapable of surviving in the US or they're already present in the US. These flowers were a small shipment coming from South Africa. So this was likely a custom shipment from who knows who the producer was. I think the report was 188 stems, which is really small. These were probably Protea, and they were probably for something like a wedding or something like that, that someone custom ordered. And whoever the producer was probably didn't keep a clean greenhouse, or maybe these were wild collected flowers. And so a lot of these smaller shipments from kind of strange, non-commercial countries that are shipping these things out tend to come in pretty filthy. And when they say that this is a risk to U.S. agriculture, it absolutely is. Once something is established in the US, once some insect or a fungus or a parasite of some variety is established in the US, it becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to eradicate. So it has to be stopped before it gets established to be the most economically feasible and realistic. So there are these inspection stations run by CBP and USDA all around the country at every major international airport. And then there are 16 plant inspection stations at every major port of entry. So there's 16 major ports of entry in the US, and then a bunch of minor ports of entry. But they all get all these inspections get funneled through those areas for the most part, or the substations at international airports. And these inspections generate hundreds of thousands of interceptions every year of potentially destructive pests. Be they insects, fungus, seeds, snails, slugs, centipedes, all sorts of things are coming through the international airport system, and also through the shipping system. So these are seaports. The seaports generally have much larger shipments. The airports handle smaller shipments. But for things like flowers, they almost all come through airports because it's faster. Because flowers die really, really fast, you need to ship them internationally really, really fast. But the other major thing that this news story only goes into minorly with CBP. CBP is Customs and Border Protection. USDA is United States Department of Agriculture. One of the big risks are passengers coming mostly from third world countries, because they bring an enormous amount of foodstuffs, plant stuffs, all shoved in their luggage. It's usually like from their garden, from their backyard, and it's generally filthy. And it's infested with all sorts of things. And you're talking about millions of people a day coming through the international airport system, and so many of them are carrying these things with them. And there's only so much inspection you can do in 24 hours. So it becomes a huge risk for spreading things internationally. And we saw this in real time with COVID back in 2020, with how rapidly the virus spread from China to other countries via the international airport system. The same problem exists for agricultural pests, human disease, other human diseases, not just viral diseases, environmental pests, all sorts of things are coming through the international airport system constantly.
Like this. Our Scott Broom has the answer from Dulles Airport.
They are tiny bugs, but their discovery here at Dulles is a big deal. One of the species has never been seen here at Dulles before. The other hasn't turned up in the U.S. in 40 years.
So these two species, so this reddish one, this is Oxycorinus maculatus. This is the one that they're saying hasn't been here in 40 years. And then this other one is Capreobia. Both of these are like geodes. This one hadn't been seen before in the U.S., this genus. This other one I've seen quite a bit. This is the Protea seed bug, I think is what it's called. And they feed on Protea flowers. But what they're saying with hasn't been here in 40 years, it hasn't been seen in Virginia in 40 years, is what that means. Or specifically, it hasn't come through Dulles in 40 years. Through the other major plant ports or the other major flower ports, this comes in fairly regularly. This other one wouldn't have been seen before, and it's only identified to genus. It's possible that this is a new species. That happens several times every year at any of these inspection locations where they will come across an undescribed species. All of those get sent to the Smithsonian Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. for identification and curation. So it's possible that it hasn't been identified, but both of these species are like geodes, seed bugs or plant bugs. They're hemipterans, and they generally are kind of wide. There's a huge variety of them. There's tens of thousands of species, and they feed on all sorts of different parts of plants, but they're a major agricultural pest and greenhouse pest, I guess.
Both bugs, one a destroyer of leafy vegetation, the other that attacks seeds, grain, and nuts, have the potential to do billions of dollars in damage to native plants and crops. So, we went behind the scenes here at Dulles to see how they find something so small.
So this is what I was talking about with international travelers bringing stuff through their luggage. When you come through customs, you have to declare if you're bringing any agricultural goods. If you don't, sometimes if you say I don't have anything and you're not otherwise suspicious or coming from a high risk country, they usually just let you through. If there's something high risk about where you're coming from, or you look suspicious, or you answer the questionnaire kind of weird ways, they will do this, which is they pull apart your luggage and look for stuff, both like the narcotics officers and agricultural officers. And you would not believe the crap that people have in their luggage. It's actually disgusting. Things that were pretty common and outrageous would be like suitcases full of rotting fish, that were crawling with insects, and they were eating, like the people would eat the insects on the rotting fish. It was really gross. At JFK, it wouldn't be uncommon for CBP officers to find trash bags full of butchered monkeys from like Congo and Nigeria and stuff. Bushmeat was a constant problem. When I was in Houston, we would get probably several hundred cases of bushmeat interceptions a month. And these would be random, unidentifiable animals which were coming from like the jungles of Africa, for the most part, jungles and savanna of Africa, that the person wouldn't know what the animal was. And our like Fish and Wildlife people, the CDC, couldn't identify what the animals were either, that they were trying to bring into the country. These were usually not cooked. This was just like raw, bloody meat in their luggage. You get all sorts of things. People smuggling live insects, exotic pet trade stuff. From like Norway and Sweden, you'd get people bringing in butchered reindeer, just all sorts of bizarre things coming in through the luggage system at these international airports. Additionally, you'd have this other layer of issues handling people's luggage, because sometimes they'd be coming from a country with an active epidemic. So if you remember back in, I want to say it was like 2015, 16, 17, there was a big Ebola outbreak in West Africa. So now you have the risk of potentially Ebola patients coming through the airport system. And then in 2018, 2019, there was I think those are the years, there was a Black Plague epidemic in Madagascar. So now you had like issues with plague patients coming through, or fleas in their luggage that would be infected with plague. All of this is a constant problem through the airport. On top of, like, this is just like people negligently bringing things in. Then you had the active smugglers that were trying to bring in rare things, which I think they talk about in this in a minute.
Small and dangerous in so much stuff. And discovered it can start with the sharp noses on a pair of...
This is the Beagle Brigade. This is my favorite. So CBP and USDA both train Beagles to do cargo and luggage inspection, and they're trained to smell generally different kinds of fruits and vegetables in people's luggage, and they're absolutely adorable. They work for 7 years at a time, and then they get retired, and they're the most fun beagles on earth.
Rescue beagles named Red and Rex. When the dogs key on a bag or cargo item, they are scanned and then searched. In this case, a passenger was unaware sausage from her home country was forbidden, one of dozens of items.
So why would sausage be forbidden? Even if it's cooked. So a lot of times it's raw, but even if it's cooked. A lot of these countries have African swine fever and various forms of swine flu that come in, and it's a huge issue. You wouldn't believe the number of countries that have these diseases. The US doesn't, and we're trying to keep it out. And the issue is that people bring even cooked meat products in, but they haven't been cooked in such a way that that it would sterilize the meat from these viruses. And then the issue is that it ends up going to like a dump or into their their trash outside, and then an animal gets into it. And ends up spreading it to like local farms, and you get this epizootic effect occurring in animals. So there's a lot of things that aren't allowed in that are meat products because of this risk. So like some poultry from Asian countries, pork products from South American countries and African countries, stuff like that.
Items that were seized just today.
People buy these as souvenirs. It's a reed hat. Unfortunately, there's something called a red palm mite.
So this is a huge problem. When I worked in Puerto Rico doing this job, these red palm mites are invasive down there. They're extremely damaging to palm trees, and they're not in the continental United States yet. We would have so many pissed tourists because they would have bought these hats at the beach, and whoever is selling the hats doesn't tell them this, but you can't bring those hats back to the continental United States because of this mite. So whenever you're in a country, and they try to sell you anything made of plant materials, just be aware that you might not be able to bring it back.
Little tiny insect, likes to live even on the dried plant like this, so these are prohibited into the U.S.
That's Chief Christopher Brewer, who is on guard for invasive species here with his team at the agriculture section of Customs in the D.C. area. And we talked about what his team found.
Earlier this week, you all announced a seizure of some flowers with insects in them. It's only bugs, I think a lot of people might think, but that's not the case. Why was that such an important seizure?
So those bugs had the potential to devastate the U.S. agricultural industry. U.S. agriculture is one of the few things where we still export more than we import into the United States, so it's a very valuable industry in the billions of dollars. So we want to prevent those insects from coming into the U.S. because they could potentially wipe out a crop. These were cut flowers coming from South.
So he kind of understates this issue, and it sounds very propaganda-y when he says it, but this is true. And you don't understand how many bugs are coming through the airport system and the seaport system on any given day. When I first started doing this job back in 2014, 2015, I was doing just at one diagnostic lab, I was doing maybe between 11 and 15,000 diagnoses a year. It was just constant stuff coming through. Not all of them are a problem, but a lot of them are. And when you get something that's on a large shipment, like with these cut flowers, it's with this particular shipment, I think, like I said, it was less than 200 stems, but a lot of these shipments are tens of thousands of stems. So when something gets seized, when something is found, like they'll do the inspection on a small subset, there's a statistical sampling method that they use, and then you would find an infestation, and it can be it's just assumed that infestation is throughout the entire shipment, because that shipment usually all comes from a single farm or a single greenhouse or something like that. And then everything has to be fumigated or destroyed, depending on what it's infested with. So this is a constant issue at the major seaports like New York, Miami, and LA, and Houston. There's the people who do the fumigations and destruction. It's a full-time job. They work basically 24 hours a day, these companies, just fumigating and destroying stuff coming in, because some of these things are so heavily infested.
South Africa, cut flowers frequently have insects, and how we check for those insects in the cargo setting is you take the bundle and you invert it and give it a nice tap and watch to see what falls out. It's big news to USDA, because they'll work with that host country to determine, is there a larger problem? Do we need to work on a better treatment schedule for the flowers?
Chief Brewer went on to talk about some of those items that were seized just today.
This is about $1,000 right here I'm holding.
Oh my goodness.
So,
And they're
Those are bird nests. This would have come from East Asia. This is for bird nest soup and bird nest tea, and they are absolutely filthy. So these are wild collected bird nests. Just people go out and pull them out of trees and then wrap them up and send them to the U.S. Not only is it a problem for animal diseases, but if you've ever, and most of you have never done this, but if you just collect a bird's nest and put it under a hot lamp, like in a Berlese funnel, you will get hundreds of parasitic insects out of the bird's nest. Bird's nests are filthy. They're full of insects that feed on the birds, and birds are filthy. So it's not just the bacteria and viruses, but it's also just this enormous parasite load. But people eat these. It's bizarre.
actual real bird nests.
Correct. They're dried. What you do is you dissolve them in hot water. They make tea, soup, things like that with it.
And these can have insects and other invasives.
So in this particular case, we're worried about things like bird flu.
Keeping out invasive species is not just an agriculture issue, it's an environmental issue too. The latest example is spotted lanternflies chewing through our native plants in the region right now. They got through the Port of Philadelphia.
So for those of you that are in or on the East Coast or in the Mid-Atlantic area, you will be super familiar with spotted lanternfly. They're so obnoxious. They reproduce in enormous numbers. I think this summer I must have seen like 1 million of these just around where I live. They feed on every tree. They eat constantly. They're disgusting. And they're probably going to spread through, most of the eastern half of the United States because they're cold adapted. So if you don't have them yet, you will have them. But like he said, they came through the Port of Philadelphia. This likely came through the seaport. And it's just one of many, many species that are constantly slamming into the airport system and the seaport system in this country. And it's just, this is not something that most people know about. Like that you have to declare stuff at customs. If you're flying from Hawaii or Puerto Rico back to the United States, you have to declare stuff to the USDA. USDA generally handles internal stuff and international shipments of like garden plants or greenhouse plants. And then CBP generally handles international travel and international shipments of consumable goods. And that's kind of the distinction in the regulatory framework. But both agencies, along with like Fish and Wildlife, CDC, there's a couple other ones that deal with this on a regular basis. And as a regular person, a regular civilian, a regular non-agricultural person, you would never know that this all is going on. And it really is just this constant risk, not just for agriculture, but for also human health. So this is about done. There's like 10 seconds left in this article or in this video. But I wanted to let you guys know what it's like to work at this. So to work this sort of job, the job pays well. It pays really well, but you just see some of the wildest stuff. Things that you wouldn't realize, like I said, like the dead chimps in people's luggage and stuff. Like you just don't know what the person sitting next to you on the plane is doing. Why they're on the plane, what they have in their luggage. It's crazy. So think about that next time you're in the airport, and I'll talk to you guys later.